Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Josh Says Mean Things podcast. We're going to, or streaming show. We're going to be trying things a little bit differently this week. We have a kind of a little bit new setup camera wise. We're trying out the new Canon USB webcam adapter. So that'll be kind of fun. Something to try out, something a little different. Yeah, so we have a good set of images. We're starting. I'll let everybody kind of populate here before everything gets going too much. But yeah, I'm pretty excited for this one. I figured out some streamlining stuff that we'll be doing. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I found some software that same software, but just figured out new ways to make it better inside XSplit, where we can. It's a lot faster for me to create these slideshows. I was really limiting it to 10 files because it would take me like 30 minutes to an hour to generate the stream and all the files. And so in this way, it's a lot easier for me to create big slideshows. So now there's like snazzy transitions and it looks a little bit higher end now. So I'm pretty excited for that. Yeah, so if you see, we have our nice, I'm shooting with my Canon 5D4 with a nice 35L on there, so I'm shooting like 1.6 just for fun. So if you're just joining us, we haven't started yet. Just kind of saying, hey, getting everybody a chance to log in. Hopefully we can top last week's viewer count. That'd be fun. Always trying to get better, always trying to do more. I know more and more people are going back to work though, so that makes it harder and harder for people to have time to go and sit down and watch a kind of a silly photo review show. So yeah, I mean, it'd be great. So if you're here, go ahead and oh, hey Ronnie, how you doing? I don't have anything clever for you today. I'm just wearing my standard Azulox polo. Nothing too clever for you today. I'm sorry to disappoint. I usually try to have something funny for you, but I got nothing this time. Yeah, I had the kids behind me until about 5 minutes ago, so I'm a little frazzled mentally. But somehow, some way, we'll persevere. We'll get through. It'll be good. It'll be good. Yeah. So if you're here, if you're starting to watch the stream, just say hello in the chat. I would appreciate that. It always makes things nice when I can see who's out there, because otherwise I have no idea who's watching. But it's fun to see who's out there. I would try my best to type and say hello. So yeah, we're trying some new stuff. Hopefully the webcam doesn't die because it's actually battery powered this time, because it's my Canon instead of using like an actual webcam. So we'll see how that goes. I realized I probably should have got a AC adapter for it. Didn't think about that. So maybe next time I'll have an AC adapter where I won't have the anxiety that my webcam's going to die at any moment. So that'll be fun. Yeah. I also probably ought to start thinking about like maybe some prizes. So if y'all have good ideas for what prizes for my favorite image of the week might be, I'm up for hearing some prize ideas as well. And no Topo Chico this week. We're down to our Waterloo Black Cherry, which is also good. I drink quite a bit of this as well, but no Topo Chico for the first time. HEB, I think, was out of it this week, or at least our curbside was. Yeah, all right. So we'll give everybody about 2 more minutes to jump in. And then, yeah, we'll start talking about a beautiful photo from, I believe it's from Mark Lasad. Yeah, and we'll start there. For now, you just get to see my pretty face. And if you have any questions or anything, just throw them in the chat. There's a little bit of lag. There's a little bit of delay, so it takes me a few seconds to get to them. But yeah, I always like hearing your questions. Always like seeing what y'all have to say. Yeah, let me know. Let me know. Also, I was planning on shooting Milky Ways this weekend, and I'm really disappointed the weather looks like it's not going to cooperate. I'm still monitoring that, so that's one of the struggles with Milky Ways. There's only so many new moons a year, which is the best time to shoot Milky Ways, and we're going to have rain all weekend, so boo on that. Boo. Boo this man. Boo. Um, hey, Naomi, how you doing? Hey, Mark, how's everybody? Good, good, good. Looks like y'all are the three that we have so far. That's good. I'll give it one more minute, see who's going to pop on. I know everybody's got a schedule. Not everybody has a alarm going off for every 5 minutes like I do when I get prepped for these things. I have so much anxiety going into them that I'm going to like miss or show up late. So I've been staring at my computer for the last 10 minutes just waiting for the right time to start, like go live. It's always that. Is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? I get a lot of anxiety before these, but good anxiety, not bad anxiety. Good anxiety where I'm ready to talk and I'm ready to perform and ready to go live and knowing that it's going to live on YouTube forever. No pressure there. No pressure whatsoever. Yeah, never any pressure. I think photography, a lot of photography is kind of like a performance art, right? I mean, we're there to take pictures, but a lot of the time we're there for people remember us for the show we put on while we're doing it. And so that's always kind of interesting to me is that what people remember from a session with me isn't necessarily the photos. Sometimes it's how I made them feel or how much energy I put out into the shoot to I don't know, to make it seem like their time was worthy as well. That's also a lot of times like after a headshot shoot, like if we do a bunch of headshots in a row or something like that, I'm usually pretty exhausted because I'm putting so much effort and energy into getting a response from the subjects, and I have to do it over and over and over again. It's almost like waiting tables. You have like 30 seconds to make an introduction, make a laugh, get the picture, get the order, and then move on. And then doing that over and over again can get kind of exhausting. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a little bit what photography is like. All right, let's see if this works. All right. There we go. Now we have a lovely photo here from, I believe this one's from Mark. Yeah, Naomi, yeah, same thing. I do too. I honestly, like, you would think after doing this since 2009 full time, you would think that I would get used to being in front of the camera or being behind the camera. I have anxiety before every shoot. Every shoot, every time, I absolutely have anxiety. But I think that's good. It makes me want to think that means that it's still reaching me. I think if I felt dead inside before the shoot, that'd be the time to hang up the camera lens. So, I think having those butterflies, having that anxiety, I think that's a good thing. Imagine if you were going on a date with somebody and you didn't have that little bit of butterfly, probably not going to be a good date. So I think it's good, right? I'm kind of married to my job at this point, so I think it's so good that the emotion is still there. I think it would be sad if I didn't feel that emotion. So, yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and start talking about photos where I can say mean things to everybody. Ha 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 ha. Now this first photo is a really cool backlit silhouette nature shot. I really love the effect. I love the feel of the photo. I love the feel of, backlight. Backlight is interesting light. If you want to make something more interesting, backlight it. If you want to make things more boring, front light it. That's why bad food photography is always front lit. Imagine going into, I don't know, usually like a mom and pop restaurant, and the menu has photos of the food and they're taken with like an on-camera flash. The food looks terrible. If you want to see great food photography in general, is backlit. And then a little fill is added, but generally the stronger lights from the back. And so this is a good example of good backlit photography. I like how the blacks go black, the whites go very white. I would say the composition feels slightly off. We have a leaf going into the left edge of the frame that gets kind of chopped off. It's kind of hard to know. I would have cropped that maybe a little bit more to the base. I like the negative space. I actually would have cropped more of the left side away so that we have bright white and black and really play with the weight. So if we talk about the weight of a photo, think about how it would balance on a seesaw with information and not information. So in this case, with whites and with details, and then the negative space that has no detail, right? So if we think about the weight balancing on a seesaw, does this balance? I think it's a little off. I think I would have moved the flower and everything more toward the left of the frame. and left some weight hanging on the right hand side. But I feel like that the crop on the left hand side is just a little bit uneven, and it's kind of chopping off the head of one of those leaves. I would have moved it over and made the viewer work for the detail a little bit. Right now, everything's dead center, which can be good. But in this case, I think it'd be more interesting with all this dramatic lighting to make the viewer work to get what the photo was about. In this case, I think it's a little bit too straightforward. It could have also been very interesting to have another version of these plants, maybe in front of the lens, so that we're getting some really cool like lens effects where it feels. I don't know, it feels more glowy, or there might be something. So in general, we have a phrase called STS. The PG version is shoot through stuff. The R version changed the last S for something more fun. But, I think if you want to make something interesting, have layers. So we have a subject and a little bit of a background, but we really don't have a foreground. And not saying that it necessarily needs a foreground, but something to think about as a way to perhaps make things better. Hey, Evelyn, how you doing? I think that I think there's ways to take this backlight and add something to it. But I think cropping is usually the first thing. I love how everything goes to like pure black and pure white. I wouldn't change that. But just think about, as a term for everybody, think about the weight of a photo. And that makes the cropping very easy, is kind of where on that seesaw of information and zero information do we want to balance things. Whereas this one kind of feels halfway in between of what it was going for. Is it centered? Then centered. Is it supposed to be off to the left? Then let's put it to the left. But it feels kind of like halfway motion. So yeah, there we go. That's our first photo of the day. It's a great shot. It definitely has that emotional impact when you see it. You're like, ooh, that's cool. But I think there's some things we could clean up to even make it a little bit more interesting. The other thing that could have been done with this is make it complete abstract. So we have on the right hand side, there's the lower branch and then kind of the mid branch, and just a shot of that abstract, like it looks like a mouth. Maybe it looks like something out of Rocky Horror. So if you had like a macro and could get even closer, and showing just the black, just the white, and just kind of like this mouth like gaping at you, that could be an interesting abstract photo as well. So just things to think about when you're composing your shots. In the moment, it's always hard. But that's why I think this type of information, this type of show is so great, is because we get mental reps from other people's photos. Hey, Mia, I didn't think you were going to be able to join us. Good afternoon. I think getting those mental reps by looking at other people's photos and kind of seeing what could have been done and talking about what could have done. Then when you're in the field, you have those in the brain so that you can kind of pull up that menu of like, oh yeah, I'm going to try this. Oh, I'm going to try this. Or when you're editing, like, oh yeah, he talked about the weight. Yeah, let's talk about that. And let me try to move this around and play with that. And so I think the more you get exposed to, the more you're ready to talk about things. The more you surround yourself with not just your own photos, I think the better your photography is going to get overall. All right, let's see if this works for us. In. Next. No. Ooh. There we go. All right. Cool. I got the slideshow to work. I am so happy. It saved me like 45 minutes today learning how to use a slideshow feature inside of XSplit. So I'm very happy about this. So here we have a very nice lit headshot of one of our patrons, Miguel. Miguel, I hope you get to watch this. And you can tell by the catch light. So if you want to look at how something is lit, you can always look at the catch lights in their eyes. Unless they edit those out. But in general, you can always look at the catch lights in somebody's eyes and see where the light sources were. So in this case, we have one overhead, a big light source overhead, and we have a small light source under the chin. And he called this one like quarantine self-portrait or something like that, which I haven't gotten to that point where I've started taking pictures of myself yet, which I think is a win for me. Nobody needs more photos of me out there. Not good. I did get so bored I took photos of flowers last week, though. And for those of you who know me, I'm not really a flower photographer. So, yeah, it's gotten to that point. But I really like this photo of Miguel. I would say when we're working with lighting, one of the things that really helps the most is distance. And in this case, the distance between the subject and the background. Okay. So Miguel is a little bit too close to the wall, I feel. Again, it's all my opinion. But here's the main thing. Move away from the wall to give room for the shadows to fall away from the subject. If we look right around the neck area, it's very shadowed, very dark, and then we have some more medium gray off to the side, and so it's kind of in that mid ground. So I would bring my subject off against that wall so that the shadows have room to fall away and not end up in the frame. The other thing, the light feels a little bit, or the top light feels a little bit more focused on the nose and the mouth, instead of like the eyes and the forehead. And the hair kind of loses some detail as well. So sometimes just like small little movements like that can make a big, big difference. And so even like a gradient tool on Lightroom or a gradient tool in Capture One, so that we want to, our eyes want to go to your eyes. And so I think a gradient tool to darken the bottoms up toward the eyes could go a long way to make this more interesting. I don't mind that the hair goes to black. That's not really what I'm here for. I'm looking for eyes and expression. But it's a little bit hot along the cheekbones, and the chin. And, the forehead, I have a shiny forehead and I'm losing hair. So I always have to be careful of that for me. But, I really want the bulk of the exposure kind of from tip of the nose up to the bridge of the eyes. That's kind of where, that's where your eyes want to go. That's why a lot of makeup artists contour cheekbones, right? So that your eyes go up, to the brighter parts, right? Shadows here, highlights there, whites of the eyes there, so that it forces you to look up to the eyes, instead of like down to your cheek line or jawline or something like that. So, oh, hi, Danielle. Danielle, I may have a question for you later, but I'll ask you offline. But yay. Good to see y'all. Hi, Danielle. Danielle was one of our 13 voyeurs that we shot over the quarantine. And if anybody wants to see more of those, I made some very lovely 12 by 18 prints out of them. And yeah, on some velvet fine art paper, and they look gorgeous. I'm very excited for them. I need to start delivering them to the people who volunteered. So I had to get more printer ink so that I can print my own copy and then deliver a copy. Yeah. Printer ink's expensive. But yeah, it's fun. It's a whole nother thing seeing your photos in print. So yeah. So yeah, for this one from Miguel, I would just tweak the lighting just a little bit. It doesn't feel, it's a clamshell lit. It's an over and under lighting setup, but it doesn't feel as beautiful as it could have been to use this setup. If we're going for more drama, maybe like a snoot or a grid could have added to that drama to keep more of that broad light from hitting our background as well. So it's just something to think about. Like, as you get further and further into lighting your subject, instead of asking where the light's going to hit, you can also ask yourself, where are the shadows going to fall? And once you start thinking about where the shadows are going to fall, it's really going to inform where you put your lights. So I think that's kind of a different way of thinking about things that you may or may not normally think about them. Okay, cool. This photo is from another one of our patrons. This one makes me laugh every time I see it. This one's from Debbie Cole. If you don't laugh, this kid is like, everybody's looking at some speaker on the stage, and there's a kid just getting his tongue ready on that watermelon. It makes me laugh, which in that case, the photo absolutely did the job, right? The photographer did the job by bringing an emotion into the story. This kid is just ready to eat that watermelon, man. He is ready to go. And it makes me smile. It makes me laugh. But there's some other interesting things going on in this photo that, I kind of want to point out. One is all of the faces are pointed kind of up and to the left of the frame. And then there's a woman with sunglasses who's looking opposite of everybody else. And so the first place my eye went is actually to that woman, because she was the pattern interrupted. So if you want to make your photos more interesting, have a pattern and then break it. Right? Think of a white picket fence, row, 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 and then one slat broken, right? You'd focus on the broken slat, right? A pattern interrupted. And so in this case, everybody's gaze and view is going up and to the left, and then she's breaking that gaze. And what I find interesting about that is that from her eyes down leads you to the boy with the tongue sticking out, ready to get on that watermelon. I've been there, buddy. Sometimes it gets hot in Texas. I'm ready to get on some watermelon as well. So I think that's I think that those are all really good techniques to have and ready to go. Kind of in what way am I going to break the pattern? In what way am I going to change people's expectations of what they're seeing? Now, all that being said, I think the processing on this photo, and maybe it was just the compression when I saw it, but it feels a little over processed a little bit. I feel like the shadows may have been boosted too much, and we're starting to kind of get some loss of detail in the shadows because I feel like they were boosted almost too high. So it can be hard, right? It feels like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, terrible light. So it can be difficult to control those. But it just feels, or maybe it's a little clarity. I don't know. There's something about this photo. It just feels a little bit either over processed or a little bit over sharpened. And so, I'd just be careful about that. It's a small tweak, but I think it would go a long way to make it feeling more natural. I think the processing starts to take it into the realm of almost feeling slightly unnatural, which in this type of photography, right, street, you kind of want that strain of truth in there so that it feels like you were there. And when you start processing it too far, it kind of takes you out of the scene a little bit. But overall, the moment's great. That kid just, I don't know, that kid's tongue just makes me laugh. So anyway, good photo, Debbie. Let's just work on the processing just a little bit, clean it up. Okay, this is a frog. It's a jeweled frog. I like that there's red and green. I think it's good sometimes to practice on things that don't move. And kind of see what's going on, especially with macro. Macro works. It's a little bit like Ant-Man. Everybody's seen Ant-Man in the MCU, right? Marvel Universe. Things work different in the quantum realm. And that's kind of true for macro photography as well. Things start working a little differently, right? Focusing starts getting different. Depth of field starts getting different. Composition gets different. Focus breathing starts getting different, right? As you're focusing, your composition is changing, and that can be a difficult thing to work with. In this one, the eye is in focus, but we have all this negative space that's not really adding the composition in the top right. We'll kind of chop off the legs. So I think this is a good practice photo, but I don't, if it was a real animal, you might want to play with it a little bit differently. I think the whites get a little too hot on the back side, and the shadows get a little dark underneath the chin in a way that don't really necessarily add to the punch of the photo. So if we're getting close, if we're getting macro, don't try to show everything. Try to show only what needs to be shown and nothing else, right? So maybe just the red eye with a little bit of the green jewels, right? Coming in even closer and coming around a little bit. So it's just the eye and just some green, right? Because then you have that contrast of red and green. And if something's not moving, we can also move it, right? We can also rotate it so that it's getting the lighting that we want. Some of the whites and the highlights are really getting blown out in a distracting way. I don't mind whites blowing out for technical sake, but when it doesn't serve the image, it starts to, that's something that we should start looking at. And feet, right? We don't want to make people pirates and, cut off at the wrist or anything like that. So just be cognizant of like where your crop is and really what you're showing. When we're out there shooting, I think another good thing to run through your head as we're shooting is, of this scene or of this subject, what's the least I can show and still make it interesting and still have the viewer know what I'm doing, right? Eiffel Tower, for instance. Do we need more shots of the Eiffel Tower? No, probably not. Not like that panoramic version. But what's interesting is using just a small part of it to where that's what it is, but then doing something else with the photo. So something like this, I would think we don't need to show the whole frog. Come in and just show maybe just the eye, just the lip, and just the jewel. And I think that would be a more interesting composition than trying to show everything. And it's a lot easier to do as well, because then you don't have to worry about where you're cropping hands and ankles and feet and all that good stuff. So, yeah. Okay. This one, I don't know what this one is. I looked at this photo for like 5 minutes. I don't know if this is a reflection. I don't know if this was a composite. I'm not really sure. At first, I thought it was a composite, and then I looked at it longer. I wondered if it was a reflection. So if this is your photo, I think it's Mark's. If this is your photo, will you just let me know if it's a composite or if it's a reflection? Because I'm kind of curious about what it is. I think it's an interesting texturization of adding a foreground by if it's a reflection, even if it's not, by adding gauges, motorcycle gauges to a street scene, as a way to give this photo a foreground, where without the reflection, it would have a middle ground and a background. I would say though that our background is kind of tilting away from us a little bit. And so a little bit of crop rotation just to make that center of the road go to buildings that aren't leaning over to the right. And so it's just those little bitty details that can make it tough. Now, I do see that the gauges, if we did that, the gauges might start getting out of sync as well. So it can be very tough to get nice and centered. And then if it is a reflection, not to have yourself in the photo as well, right? A lot of things to consider. But I don't know any of that, and I'm just judging it based on what I see. Just a little bit of straightening composite. Okay. Yeah, so that background file then, straighten up your edges. Everything's tilting away from us. And so just straightening that out so that in between the gauges, we have the road going through it. And I think that would make it a more engaging photo, so that there's a payoff at the end of that road that's not crooked. It also, that background's maybe a little HDR'd. We're starting to get some interesting halos around the sun. I do like the starburst. That probably tells me it was shot around f16 to f22. I actually like my wide angle lens that I bought because I like the way it starbursted photos at f16. How's that for a nerd tip for you? If you want to make your sun or any bright spot into a starburst, go to f16 or f22 on a wide angle lens and judge how it starbursts the light source. So, yeah, cool. Again, this is a hard one, right? In the sense that these bike shows and stuff, it's a cool moment, right? There's all these bikes, there's all the stuff going on, but how to make it interesting to the viewer. So I kind of like that the gauges were composited in. It gives you something to look at, makes you work to see what the photo's all about. There's just a couple little technical things I would clean up, like making everything straighter. Also, I would have liked this camera to have been tilted up a little bit so that we don't cut off the Frost Tower, because it got a haircut and it's cutting off like the top floor. Yeah, so that's what I would have changed on that one. Okay, and this one's from the buttons. We have Big Boy Steam Train. Go, I'm talking. What? Go do whatever you need. Do whatever you need. Sorry, 9-year-old, home with quarantine. Sorry about that. So this is Big Boy. We actually went and chased it with my 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. We shot it in Luling. This one, I'm not sure where it was shot. But it's a cool moment, right? These nice kind of floral changing of the fall color trees. We have this historic steam train coming down the track. We have good leading lines. This is the one time I think it's actually appropriate to have railroad in your photos, right? And most of the time we have bad railroad portraits done, right, where the subject has the converging lines, which don't do that because you're trespassing. And my family business that I grew up in is train derailment, so I don't trust railroad tracks for nothing. Anyway, so what I like about this photo, I do like the leading lines. The steam coming out is blown out, unfortunately, and your eye goes to that really hot steam coming out. And so if that could have been controlled a little bit better, that would have been nice. I know this photo had a lot of power lines in it that had to be cloned out. You can see a little bit of the artifacting coming out from there. But outside of that, I like the feel. Like, this is the type of angle and twist and turn of a steam train photo that would end up in a calendar, right? It's got this kind of nice low angle. It makes the train look kind of nice and athletic. There's a bend behind it so that we can see more of the train as it kind of arcs around the track. So there's a lot going on here. It's got the light on the front. We can see the good identification. So it's very nice. It's one of those things. These things come by at 50 miles an hour. You only get one chance at it. So that can be very difficult. I know when I was trying to get photos of this event, I tried to go to the next town over, and it was just a zoo, and there was no way to get to where I wanted to get. So I mean, good job on what it was. I like the clouds. I like the feel. I like the smoke. But just controlling those highlights a little bit so that it doesn't peek out. One of the things I'll say with a photo like this, where you have that big like bright spot like that, if you're going to make a print, especially if you're going to make a print on like a metallic luster or a pearlescent type photo, be careful with hotspots like this because it won't lay down ink. And then you can kind of get ink islands on your print that where you hold it up, it didn't have that same luminosity, and so it can look kind of weird if you have hotspots. Lightroom, you can turn on the hotspot bumper to see if you were blown out or not. But this would be a case where you would set for the highlights and then bring up the shadows and everything in post, just because once the highlights are gone, they're really hard to recover. So yeah. Okay, and this one is from Rachel Hall. Rachel, I hope you're out there listening. And Rachel said, hey, what can I do better with this one? So again, I think we're going to go back to Miguel's photo, which is to say, look at where the shadows are falling. Okay, so I'm guessing this is at some type of teenage event, maybe a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah type, just knowing Rachel, that's what she shoots. So I like the skyline. I think it's a good balance of flash and ambient. Okay, so the absolute levels of what the ambient looks like and what our flash subject looks like, good balance there, right? So good exposure in the background, good exposure on her. Okay, I like the little twinkling lights in the background as well. Now, here's what I would add, or here's what I would change. One, we have a very, small person, 12, 13-year-old. And against that skyline, she already feels smaller. And so if we had come down, 10 inches a foot and made her and shot more coming up at her, we would make her feel more heroic, and make her feel stronger and bigger by shooting up at her, right? With kids, we have a tendency to shoot down on them, and it emphasizes how small they are compared to an adult. And so if you want to change that dynamic, get lower than them and shoot up, and then you'll make things that are smaller appear more heroic and make them appear bigger. And so I think that'd be the first thing that I would do, is change the angle of where I was shooting. The second thing I would do, we have some really harsh shadows coming across the edge of her face. And so that could be changed for a couple ways. One, we could bring the light source up higher and over, okay? Or in some direction, right? So that instead of having shadows running across the bridge of her nose, they could come more at an angle, right? More of that butterfly light. The other thing we could do is soften up our light source. So instead of using a bare speed light or a bare strobe, we could put a shoot through umbrella or a softbox or a scrim or something like that, where we're softening up. And really what we're doing is we're expanding the wrap of the light so that some of that light comes around the nose so that we don't get those shadows coming across. If you can see, her right eye is almost full shadow. And so that's something that I would really work to mitigate, is putting the light in a different angle or a different light source in the sense of an umbrella or a softbox or something, so that it's not such a hard spot on her. Another interesting way to do this is if you had a spot grid and kind of mostly on the same axis of the camera, and we could have spotlit just her face and let everything else come down a little bit more in exposure. And really, right, we're spotlighting the girl quite literally then. And that could be an interesting way to go about this photo as well. Also, it feels like it maybe could be warmed up a touch. I would have brought down the sky like a third, 2/3 of a stop, just to bring those highlights and really make that sunset even more impactful than it is now. So yeah, changing the angle of our light, changing the shape of our light would go a long way here. Another trick you could do, if you gel your light, maybe quarter stop, like a quarter CTO or a half CTO, a little orange to it, and then lower your white balance to like 4000 CTO, it's going to change all that ambient light bluer and make the sky even more impactful that way as well. So as a trick, you can warm up your lights and then cool down your ambient, and now you have a contrast between that as well, right? So if we talk about contrast, right, black and white photography has a lot of contrast, but we can also have color contrast, and an orange cool or a warm cool feel can be a way to really add more contrast to your photos as well. So yeah, maybe like a quarter stop CTO, and then adjust against that by cooling down your white balance to maybe like 4500 Kelvin. That could be a very interesting way to combat this scene as well. Okay. I don't know what's going on in this photo. So this is shot by a good friend of mine, Brian. I'm guessing it was done with the lens baby that he has as well. This is a weird photo. I think it's entitled Mask, so I'm guessing that it has a mask on it. Um, I don't know. It's a weird one. It certainly makes you laugh. He's punching himself. There's something tattooed on his knuckles. I don't know quite what it says. Stay maybe. I don't know. Um, I really like the use of the lens baby to make this feel even more surreal. And it's not the sharpest lens in the world, but we don't want to see all the sharpness in the mask. So it makes the viewer work like, what is that? Is it a mask? Is it skin? And so I think adding surrealism at the right times is also very useful. Um, yeah. I would say the white is a little blown out on one cheek, but overall, this is a silly photo meant to evoke a certain emotion, and it certainly does that. Um, I'm guessing it shot with the lens baby just by how out of focusly weird everything is. Which, if you've never tried, lens baby is an interesting lens to play with. I wouldn't recommend shooting with one while you've been drinking. It will make you dizzy and want to fall over. It does that to me when I'm sober. I can't imagine trying to do something like that with that lens when I've had one too many. It's also like shooting with my Rolleiflex when you're looking down. I've had vertigo in my life, so that shooting with a Rolleiflex also makes me feel very weird and strange if I do it for any length of time. But yeah, that's just a fun photo mask. I think it's fun, right? What can you do with just a mask and a background, right? Not too much, but this really shows some emotion and some fun. So anyway, I would say go out and have fun when you can. So yeah. All right. This is from Mr. Bill Bunton. He told me all the lighting he had to get this. This feels like it could be a freeze frame from a like a Nat Geo documentary on like color, right? And they're like, here's how we change all the things, or like the still frame that goes with the Netflix like header or something. Um, it's very interesting lit. I have ideas for mirrors, and I haven't played with them enough. And so kudos to playing with mirrors. Um, I should be doing more of it. The other thing I really like is that there's a little bit of atmospheric haze going on, and a spotlight just on the top of the globe. So this is just to me just a really fun lighting setup. Um, and I know it must have taken a while to get all of the angles right. Lighting and mirrors like this are really difficult to get just right. And it's one of those things, you move an inch, oh, too far. Move half an inch, oh, that's right. And then you move another one, and it's just a constant fiddling process going back and forth to get everything just right. When you have a photo like this, I would recommend getting your composition, locking down your tripod, and locking down your composition, and then don't move the camera, and then design your set to fit the camera. Because if you try and change your camera and the set, you're going to keep going back and forth, and it's going to get frustrating. So be confident, pick an angle of view in your camera, and don't touch your camera anymore, and then just work on making the set look right from the viewpoint of the camera, and not from what it looks like from above or from the side or anything else. Um, but I do love the colors. I do love the color contrast. And I like that there was some atmospheric haze used. I used some on my last shoot. I went through about a half a can. So that's always fun, right? What are some ways that we can show light by putting a particulate matter, either by haze or with smoke or flour or something like that in the air, rain, right? We can show the light where all we normally do is just see the effect of the light. And so I like that we can see that little tunnel of light coming down to the top of the globe by using some of that haze, and that's a good way to use that. Yeah, I buy it by the case because I use it all the time. All right, here's another one, and I like this one. I really like this. I think this is a great way of taking a big scene and making it more intimate. Okay, so I'm sure the whole place they were at was beautiful, but the photographer made a good choice in making it exactly what they wanted you to see, no more, no less. And so we have these really cool, the stumps with these flowers growing, and then a reflection of the tree. I love reflection shots. I have always, from a very young age, been obsessed with reflection shots. And so I think this is really fun, and kind of adds some surrealism to it, some abstractness to it. Um, The other thing I would say, though, that compositionally that's strong, from the lower right-hand side up to the middle, all the lines are kind of pointing up, and they point to the tree, and then the tree points down, and then it gives you just a little bit of place for you to move, and then you start moving to the right. And so we kind of have this triangular pattern that your eye follows. So it goes up to the tree, down to the sky, across, and then left to right, back to the base of the stump. Everything points back up. So we have, if you squint your eyes, you'll see the triangle, right? So sometimes there's too much detail in a photo. So if you squint your eyes, it reduces the detail that you see, and you're left with just seeing shape and color. So I think if you do this on this photo, you'll kind of see what was going on with it. And I also like that there's like yellow and blue, there's greens and purple. So we have a lot of color contrast as well. So really good use of showing, taking a big scene and making it small and showing only exactly what the photographer wanted you to see, so that you didn't see more or less than only what they wanted you to see. Okay, so I think that's my exhortation for you for the next couple of weeks, is to shoot something so that what you show in the frame is only what you want to show, and the viewer only sees exactly what you want to show them. Okay, but really good job. I love the cloud on this, just that really happy cloud against the greenery. We have a good diagonal line, good triangles, and good compositional leading lines that are kind of rotating around through the frame there. Okay, this one's from Furby Gang, Kira. She said, man, what can I do better with this? I like the idea behind this photo, but there's some things we need to clean up with it. Okay, so if we have something like this where it's supposed to be a center composition, that center channel needs to be exactly centered. And so again, this crop feels kind of halfway. The groom, his shadow gets cut off, but I think that would have been an interesting part of the composition. If this were me, I'd move everything about a third over to the right so that we had a strip of white, the strip of her, and then the groom, and let his shadow finish. Now, if we didn't want his shadow to finish, having that center strip exactly in the center and then a tighter crop where she's centered and he's off to the side could be interesting. But as it is right now, it kind of feels halfway. Is it supposed to be centered? Well, it's not. Is it supposed to show his shadow all the way? Well, it's not. And so it's kind of in between. One of the things she also brought up to me was that, hey, I was out doing a 1 or 2 hour elopement session, so I didn't bring all my lights. I have found that elopement sessions and smaller weddings, I have a lot more time and freedom to do the things I want to do than bigger weddings. With bigger weddings, there's so many people's demand on the couple's time that I don't get that much time. And so for smaller elopements, I actually get all the time I want to do whatever I want with a couple. And so I would suggest to you to bring all your gear all the time, because you never know when you're going to need it. I just did a commercial shoot and they told me we were doing video, and I got there. Luckily, I'd brought all my still gear with me as well, because when I got there, they were like, oh yeah, we want stills too. And so it's a good thing to always kind of overbring stuff. You can always leave it in the truck, but bring all the stuff you might need to make interesting photos, because a lot of times when we think we're going to have opportunity, we don't. And when we don't expect to have opportunity, we do. So prepare for the worst, plan for the best. All right. This one's from Naomi, and with a very cool model named Cassandra. She's one of my favorite models in Austin. I've only got to work with her once, but she's really funny, and I like working with her. I need to work with her again, but I just haven't had, I don't know. I've reached out, it just hasn't worked out. Anyway, she's really cool. So this photo's interesting. When I first saw it, I couldn't tell if it was how it was lit. And Naomi shared with me that it was shot basically around noontime, and then it is lit with a shoot-through umbrella, and the sun is the light source, and the umbrella is iridescent. And so I think that's a creative use of channeling a light source that we always have into something that we don't always have. Okay, so we're taking the sun, which we always have, and then using it in that hard light through an umbrella that has a bunch of shimmery, shiny things, And so then we're left with all these different colors and lines, and kind of interesting feel to it. I like that there's just a little bit of her hand. There's just enough of her hand to know that she's grasping something. And I like that her hair kind of spirals around and curly cues and all that. But we have some really cool, like purple, green, blues, all those colors. And it's not supposed to feel like a normal portrait. It's supposed to feel odd, and it does in a good way. I really like this. I like that there was makeup, that there was forethought, that we have all these shimmery textures, right? Not only with our light source that is shimmery, but it looks like there's glitter, there's things on her eyes, there's materials. And so I think it all works together as in a low-key portrait to really kind of get a feel for something strange. I like the way that her jawline kind of gets tracked with the rim of the shadow. And it actually makes her face feel even smaller, right? So if you want to make something interesting, show less. And in this case, if you want to make something interesting, light it less, right? That first photo we saw, very little was lit. This one, that same, right? Very little was lit. I think this edit would be interesting as well. I don't know that it would be better, but I think it might be interesting to leave just the highlights and take all the shadows and blacks all the way down. And so where we don't have all those highlights going in. I would also say in the very top right corner, there's just a little bit of a hot spot. I would crop down like 10 pixels on the top right, just so that your eye stays on her eye and her lips. Yeah, maybe 10 or 20 pixels on that top right and just drag it down a little bit so that our eye doesn't want to go off to that bright corner. Okay, so yeah, always check your corners and kind of see what's going on there. You don't necessarily want to give the viewer a chance to escape the photo. You want to keep them in the photo. And so we kind of want to put barriers up so that the eye has to stay in the photo when we don't give them a chance to leave. So yeah, I'd be interested in a re-edit where everything goes black or very shadowy except for the highlighted parts on her cheekbones, her eyes, and her lips, a little tip of her nose, a little tip of her finger. I think that could be a very interesting way to look at it as well. Yeah, cool. All right, and we're back to the beginning. So that is it for this week. We will be doing another one in 2 weeks, probably in the evening. I'm going to try to alternate those because I know that some people have real jobs. I don't. I have a very fun job, and I thank you all to my clients that allow us to do those kind of fun things. So this has been episode 4 of Josh Says Mean Things. If you can and support us on patreon.com/Azulux, we would appreciate it. Also, we have a podcast called the Make Podcast. It is now on Spotify and iTunes. And so if y'all like what we do, if y'all could go subscribe and just let it run in the background so we can get our view count up, that would be awesome. I'm trying to do some more stuff with that. If you have people that you think would be interesting for me to talk with that maybe make something cool or kind of have a new business approach, I would love to talk to them. So send me an email, Josh@Azulux, or just message me on any platform and let me know. But yeah, I'm really trying to spotlight people that are making interesting things. And so yeah, I would love some user suggestions on who we should be talking to on that. Anyway, I appreciate y'all for showing up. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll see you on 2 weeks. Thanks, guys.